Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. Today, going to move on further into a turn here of The Fires of Midway by Clash of Arms Games, designed by Stephen Cunliffe. Now, last episode showed how to do the search method with a solo play. And again, this is basically a solo version of the game. Excuse me. So, for those of you who, like me, are primarily solitaire players, this is kind of why I am posting this. So we've got everything set up. We've got our 3 Japanese decks, fighters, attack cards, and defense cards. We have our map set up here with the U.S. carriers here, and I have my one lone carrier closer to the squall just in case I need to go hide at some point. You can only have 2 carrier markers in a space, and then the Japanese here are in these 2 spaces randomly determined, and also randomly determine which 2 carriers are together. Now, at this point, we are ready to do the strategy phase. Now, normally in a 2-player game, you deal out the strategy cards, and you put 1 per carrier. And you can see here's the strategy cards. This is card number 1. However, in a solitaire game, the problem with this is that you deal the cards, and then there's a chance to steal. The confident player steals that. And again, in a regular 2-player game, there's such a thing as a confident player and a desperate player. I always play as a desperate player, which gives you 9 cards for your hand, because since the Japanese have basically guaranteed most of the time to get a card, although I do have the 1d6 method where if they roll a 1 they get no card to play on a particular action. I give myself the 9 cards because sometimes you can get stuck with a bunch of cards you can't use. You get stuck with too many fighter cards because there's a ton of fighter cards, or I should say air combat, because you can also use them for your bombers when you're defending against Zeros or Wildcats. But there's just a lot of those. You get stuck with a bunch of them. So I always play with a hand size of 9 for myself, just to kind of keep things balanced. And again, some of these observations I'm making and tweaks I've done after I have played this game now this is my 29th play. So, I've played this quite a bit. So again, these are just suggestions though. You don't have to use some of my solo rules. If you like the rest of the way the game flows, you can just use the solo rules that come with the booklet. No biggie. Alright, so I'm not going to deal with the dealing and stealing action cards. I'll show you how I handle that. Because again, when you play solo, you want to have as much uncertainty as possible, like in a real 2-player game. So this is why I came up with the method, which I'll explain here in a second, how I do. Now, the other thing is you can go ahead and move. You can move 1 map area here if you wish. Now, as the American player, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to move forward because the range of the planes is less. Now, the Japanese, of course, their doctrine at the time especially was basically close with the enemy, find them as fast as you can, and clobber them as hard as you can, which, when you think about it, carrier warfare back like in 42, 43, that's pretty much what it was. It was basically a big game of Marco Polo, and whoever found the other person first, you clobbered them as hard as you could, as fast as you could. So we moved our carrier task force closer together to prepare for engagement. All right, now, we have the carrier actions here. Now, the first thing we do is figure out who is the carrier that goes first. Now, if you look at my carriers here, I've assigned each a colored die. What I do to give uncertainty and not know who is going to activate first is I assign everybody a die, and then I take all those dice and roll them in my dice tower, and high die wins. Whoever has the highest roll, that carrier goes first. In the event of a tie, well, then we have a second roll. So, for example, here, I've rolled all 7 of my dice. And as you can see here, we've got 2 Japanese carriers, the Zuikaku we got 1 Japanese carrier, the Zuikaku, and 2, let me try this again. Got 2 Japanese carriers. The Zuikaku and the Zuiohu have rolled 6s. The Wasp has rolled a 6 also. Now the other ones, since they're not tied for the highest die roll, we'll just eliminate them from this roll. So now we'll have a re-roll just of these 3. And again, high die roll wins. So they get to take the first action. And that die roll has been won by the Zuiohu. So the Zuiohu will get the first action card. Now, when you get an action card, you've got several choices on them here. you can take an into the wind action, which basically tells you how many planes you can launch. In this case, 3. Notice this symbol here means if you have any fires on your deck, you can't launch planes, which is logical. You can also do battle stations. Battle stations will let you launch planes, 2, and also let you use repair points, which we'll get into more how those work as we start to get hammered here and there. Or you can do a save the ship action. Save the ship allows you to reload your hand with 2 cards and do 5 repair points. Now, since, of course, the Japanese are off and rolling here and running, they're just going to go ahead and prepare to launch an airstrike and try to find the enemy. Now, of course, as we all know, you can see everybody here. But here's the thing. When the counters are up this side, you add 1 because they haven't been found yet. And that will affect things here in a moment whenever we actually go and search. Oh, I almost forgot, too. I was going to put up, because I forgot to do it last night, I do have a cap here, because remember I got that ready cap card last night, and there's my wildcat with my wasp. Okay, so now that's done. So, what I'm going to do is I get to launch 3 cards from here. Now, this Wiohu doesn't have too many cards to begin with. It's got a couple of zeros and a Kate. So what I'm going to just do is I'm going to launch 2 cards. I'm going to launch these 2. I'm going to launch the 0 and this Kate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and use them to try and find the big carrier group, aka the 2 American carriers. Because I heard rumors there's American carriers out there. The IJN is looking for them. Now, when you do this, you take the location of the carrier, which in this case is carrier D, which is right here. And you count the number of spaces between the carrier the planes are being launched from and the carrier they're going to. So 1, 2, 3, and then we add 1 more because these ones are not as yet located, 4. Now, once you have the number of spaces figured out, you draw 4 cards off this multi-purpose deck here, this blue deck. And this is where we get into the gas icons. Okay, see here, gasoline. The headwind and stuff is just kind of all for explanation of what's going on and why there's so many gas cans. So now what we'll do is we'll total up the number of gas cans on these cards. So we have 1, 2, 3. Oh, closing fast, so none. 2 closing fasts, so only 3. Now, once you total up the number of gas cans, then you compare it with the fuel rating of each plane. You can see the 0 has a 5, and the Kate has a 4. If the number of gas cans is equal to or greater than the fuel rating, then the plane is flipped over to its smoking side, basically symbolizing fatigue, wear and tear as you're headed to the target. Now, the Japanese do not have this problem, so they are ready to roll. And since they're going after our big group here, now we turn these 2 counters over, and these guys have been spotted. So the next Japanese strike will not have to spend as much gas because they'll know where they are located. Now, since there is 1 Japanese attack plane, and of course even when there's multiple Japanese attack planes and there's multiple targets, I always roll a die. Because again, you know, in the hectic atmosphere of battle, you never know who is going to go where. You know, all of a sudden everybody may go after the carrier that they think is damaged so they can finish it off or what have you. So that will be determined by a die roll here in a little bit. Now, the next part of things we do, though, is we do a spotting roll. Now, the U.S., with a spotting roll, gets to roll 2 dice. The Japanese only get to roll 1. And basically, spotting roll is pretty simple. You roll your dice, and if the dice are, either one of them, for the American player, are either equal to or less than the number of planes, they have been spotted. So, guess what? The enemy has been spotted. Now, what does that mean? That means I get to scramble a fighter plane off the deck and engage the enemy. Now, there is a fighter escort, so I'm going to have to deal with that. So now we'll get into some fighter combat. All right, now, in fighter combat, you have cards that you can play. Let's talk about those briefly. So here, you have this icon means only a fighter plane can use it. Okay. Other icons at the bottom I'll kind of go over as I go along here, but this is an important one because if say the Wildcat was attacking the Kate, if this was a Japanese card, you wouldn't be able to use it because it's a fighter only card. So what I'm going to do is I'll pick my card and I'll explain which one I'm going with here. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to go with this cross weave here. Now it's a fighter only. Check, I have a Wildcat. This means that the Japanese lose one of their dice and it goes to me. This gives me an extra die and this gives me extra bullets if I managed to win the aerial combat fight. Now, I roll my 6-sided die to see if the Japanese get a card. They do indeed. So now they draw their card. Oh, bad luck. Why am I saying bad luck? Because this symbol here, when you see this little crosshair symbol, that means that it cancels out the other player's card. And it gives the 0 now an extra die. So unfortunately, I have lost my combat card for this battle test. Okay. Once you have the combat cards played, then you basically roll a number of dice equal to how many die icons there are on the cards. So the Japanese here will roll 4. 3 on the 0, 1 with the combat card, and then the Wildcat will roll just 2. And basically, dice test is pretty simple. You roll the dice. So let's roll the Japanese. Ouch. They rolled a 3, a 2, and 2 6s. So basically, it is whoever has the highest die roll. If somebody has 2 of the highest, then they win. So for example, right now, with the Japanese having 2 6s, as the Americans, the only thing I can do is try to tie those 2 6s, and that's probably not going to happen. And yeah, I was right about that. It's a 4 and a 1. However, if the Japanese had 1 6 and I had rolled 2 6s, I would win the test. Now, once that's done, then you go to your bullet icons. And that's how many shots the 0 is going to get at our poor Wildcat. So they're going to get 3 shots on it. Woo! Hold on to your butts. Here we go. And it's a 6, a 4, and a 1. That's very bad. And why am I saying that? Very simple. If you look at the bottom of the cards, this tells you what happens with the hits. So a 1, 2, or 3 got a little shield. Basically nothing happened. Wildcats are pretty sturdy. 4 and a 5 are smoking. You flip them over. But look at the 6. The 6 is a fiery mess, so that Wildcat is shot down. Now, when you use your dice roll test, you only use the highest die applicable. So you can't hit a plane twice and basically shoot it out of the sky with 2 smoke results. That doesn't happen that way. But the Japanese did roll a 6, which means bye-bye Wildcat, and they go into the watery grave. More about that later. So now we take the Japanese card and put it in the discard pile. And now we're ready for the Kate to make her torpedo approach. Now there's 2 American carriers eligible here. So I will roll a die, odd or even, and they're going after the Yorktown. So here comes the Kate. Now, with a bombing attack, basically it's the same kind of thing. As a defender, you have defender cards. You can go ahead and play them. So I'm going to look and see what kind of defender cards I have here available to myself. Okay, I'm going to play this one. Now this one here has 2 dice, so I'll get 2 extra dice to roll for the dice engagement test, which is the same thing as fighters, and I'll have an extra bullet. So if I win it, I'll get an extra crack at them. Let's see if the Japanese are going to play a card. Excuse me for the kick. Oh, it's a 1, so very rare. They do not have one. So again, just like the fighter combat, we have the engagement roll. So, oh, I'm sorry. Wait, I'm looking at the wrong group. Whoops. This has got to be the Lexington. That's got to deal with that. And I should have launched the... Oh, I had the cap plane on the Wasp. Oh, dang it. I forgot I flipped those 2 around last night when I was reorganizing things. Well, you know what? That's friction. Too bad. So sad. Thanks for playing. Here's some nice parting gifts for you. Turtle wax for a shinier turtle. So let's check this bomber engagement test. Ooh, the Kate only rolled a pair of 2s. So that's their best. Now, the Lexington gets to roll 4 dice all together. 2 from the card and 2 from the carrier itself as normal. So here we go. 4 dice. I rolled a 5 is my highest. Remember, you compare the highest. So now we won the dice test. So now we'll get a chance to shoot down the Kate before it has a chance to drop its torpedoes. And again, you total up the bullets, 1 from the card, 2 from the carrier itself. So now I'm rolling 3 dice, and I use just the best roll available. Shoot. All right, so I got a 5. That was my best. So the bad news is not shot down. Good news is hopefully this will be okay. All right. Now, when you do the actual bombing run, whether it's a torpedo plane or a dive bomber, that's when you use these cards again here. And on the bottom, see that card's mocking me. This says ready cap, and I forgot to use my ready cap. Yeesh. On the bottom there, you can see, for torpedo hits, you need a 1, 2, or a 3. 4 is a shield, so nothing happens, and 5 and 6 deal with dive bombers, hence the fireball. We'll talk about that later. Now, in a regular game, you would pull 2 of these cards and choose the best one. However, again, after playing this game for a while, this is my 29th play, I found it makes the game more exciting and less predictable. Not predictable, but less, I don't know what the word I want is. Maybe not predictable. But it makes it more exciting and fun if you only use one. Because, again, to me, it's kind of like the Fortunes of War. Now, on the bombers and torpedoes planes, they have one symbol. Or a symbol, I should say. In this case, 1 torpedo. So they get to roll 1 die. And it's a 6. Now, a 6 is a fireball. And we'll talk about what that CR means later. So this is a torpedo plane, so it completely missed the target. So now that Kate will have to limp back home to the Zuiho. However, from the Japanese perspective, their situation is pretty good. Now, the last thing we do here on the way home is any smoking planes, full planes that are fine, like the 0, don't have to roll. But any smoking planes, you count the number of spaces between the target and the home base, which in this case is 3. If you roll less than that, the plane does not make it home. I just rolled a 2 for the Kate, so the Kate goes into the watery grave. The 0 heads back home and lands on the deck, and now we're ready to activate the next carrier. So we'll do that in the next episode. I'll do a few of these just to give you an idea again of the playthrough and to show you how the game functions. Because that's primarily my mission here, is just to show you how the game is played. So you can decide, hey, does this look like something I think I would enjoy playing, you know, by myself or with other people? And of course, most of mine are solo. But this is Tim Korchnoi from Bare Bones Wargaming, wishing you victory and good times in your games. And when we come back next episode, we'll find out who gets the next strike. Dun, dun, dun. See you then.